everyone! Welcome once again to the Pop Culture Yearbook. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm the real Manos.
We have jumped once again in our time machine. We're going back to the fantabulous 80s. And what year have we picked from the 80s, Manos?
Well, the Wayback Machine has taken us all the way back to 1980.
Heck yeah, man. 1980. How old were you in 1980, Manos?
I was 9 years old in 1980. Nine years old.
I was -4.
Haha, that means I could have beaten you up pretty easily.
Yeah, except I was invisible because I didn't exist. Yeah, it's hard to fight, something that's not existing yet. Well, hey, here's some stuff that happened in 1980. That was the year that Ronald Reagan was elected president. That was the year that Japan became the world's largest auto-producing country. The Iran-Iraq War began, which went for 8 years. John Lennon was killed. That was the year that the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas burned in a fire. It was the first fax machines in Japan, Manos.
Wow.
That was the year that Voyager 1 went to Saturn and proved that the moon Janus existed. That was the first year for Pac-Man.
Wow.
That was the year that CNN became the first 24-hour news station. I can't really imagine a world without 24-hour news.
It's strange. I don't know. I remember being a kid, there wasn't even 24-hour stations. Everything would end at a certain time at night.
Yeah, you grew up with the phrase, "This ends our broadcast day."
Yeah, it was weird. There was still, when I was a kid, I can't remember, there was even a point where HBO would go off the air.
How old is HBO? Do you know the answer to that?
HBO came out in the early 70s.
I didn't know it was that old.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't remember when specifically. I remember my parents got HBO, I was like 8 or something like that, or it was like 1978 I think we first got it. And HBO would end. And they even showed edited versions of some movies too. Like when Saturday Night Fever came on, they showed the R version and the PG version, which was interesting, and they would show it at different times.
See, now I'm going to have to look up the history of some of that stuff, because I'd also be interested to know, when pay-per-view started. Stuff like that.
Pay-per-view? That was like late 80s, early 90s, right?
Yeah, I think it's a lot later.
Yeah.
That was also the year, amusingly, that Post-it notes were invented.
You mean Romeo and Michelle didn't invent it?
No. And it was the year of the famous cliffhanger of Who Shot JR from Dallas. The top 3 grossing films that year were The Empire Strikes Back, 9 to 5, and Stir Crazy. Other popular films were Airplane, Superman 2, and The Blues Brothers. Popular musicians that year included ABBA, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Michael Jackson, and of course Queen. And the biggest thing in comics that year was the X-Men Phoenix Saga. Manos, what have you chosen to talk about from 1980?
I decided to grab a musical film, actually, and
really?
Yes, and it's a film that actually did do very well. It was a big budgeted film, about around $20 million, and made $2 million at the box office, so it was kind of a bomb. I think it has a lot to do with the changing times. It is a film called Can't Stop the Music. Can't Stop the Music is the comedy musical kind of biography that's not exactly accurate. The fictionized autobiography of the Village People.
Wow, really?
Yes.
I've never heard of this. All right.
It's a film that was, because, when I was a kid, disco was big, and there were a few acts as big as, the Village People. And, they had their costumes and their, catchy, songs, and they were just all over the place. So, of course, when something hits that kind of big zenith, they have to make it into a movie. They did that, with Spice World. Unfortunately, just like Spice World, it was kind of over by the time the film came out. And the Village People had, of course, they were a disco act that kind of was put together, a lot like a lot of boy bands, actually, kind of put together by producers to kind of hit a certain niche, with each kind of guy or character, if you want to call it that. And, they came out of Greenwich Village. And, hence the name Village People. And, of course, their big songs are, YMCA and In the Navy. And this film is supposed to be sort of the comedic kind of story of how they got together. And the film, it's sometimes called Alan Carr's You Can't Stop the Music. And the film stars, I'm not kidding, Steve Guttenberg, Bruce Jenner, Valerie Perrine from Superman. Miss Tessmacher?
Yeah, Miss Tessmacher.
Yeah, and let's see. Then, of course, the Village People themselves. And here's something that I find interesting. A lot of people probably who haven't seen the film probably don't really know this. The Village People really aren't the stars of the film. They're almost a plot device. The film is about Steve Guttenberg and Valerie Perrine. Let's see. They play kind of roommates and people were sort of in the music industry. Steve Guttenberg plays this guy named Jack Morrell, who is a wannabe producer, and he wants to put together this band, and he starts finding these guys, and the Indian guy is like a roommate or like a guy who hangs out around his place, and he already has the headdress. And he's just hanging around with the headdress. And, they run into the cowboy and the construction worker guy. What's interesting is before the construction worker guy even, joins the band, there's a musical number that goes on in his head where he just imagines him singing. And I don't know why he has a song all by himself, but he does. And slowly we watch the group come together. But
that sounds so goofy.
It is goofy. And and of course Valerie Perrine, it plays Samantha Simpson, who tries to help, and Bruce Jenner plays her boyfriend, who is supposed to be like a clean-cut conservative guy who's not about this at all until he realizes that this could be a money-making operation and it's all in good fun and stuff like that. Then he kind of completely gets into it, and I'm trying to think, where should I go from here? The film, what I think is one of the downfalls of the film is the film really is more about the cynical background of putting this stuff together, and there's so many really unfunny, boring negotiating scenes that are supposed to be in the know and really funny, and each time they just drag the film down. You're just waiting for the next really goofy musical number. And
so let me ask you this: why did it cost so much to make? Are there just huge set pieces and costumes and stuff?
There were. It's shot all over New York, and there's a lot. There are quite a few big set pieces actually. They need to raise money for an album, or not an album, to create a demo. So they get a job to do a commercial for milk, and it's the longest milk commercial you've ever seen. It's the length. It's a 3-4 minute song, and there's no way they would put this on TV. It turns into this weird
the milk infomercial.
Yeah, and it's just milk too. I mean, it's not particular milk. Then there's a sequence where they, of course, go, hey, let's go to the YMCA. And we spend 5 minutes there with the sequence. And there's
naturally.
There's a lot of bad New York comedy that's straight out of Superman 3. And or it's the worst parts of 2. And this film is actually directed by Nancy Walker, who I don't know if you know, but she was popular at the time.
That sounds familiar.
She was a actress, comedian, writer. She was mostly known during the 70s as playing Rhoda's mother in the sitcom Rhoda. And,
okay.
And also she had been, a huge string of commercials for Brownie paper towels as Rosie, the counter lady. And the catchphrase in those commercials were the quicker picker upper.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So, yes, they got this elderly female comedian writer to direct this film about the village people. I'm not sure why that was like the perfect choice. It was, I don't know, almost akin to having David E. Kelly do Wonder Woman. It's just like, yeah, let's get that person. It's such a bizarre film, and I wanted to choose this because this is basically the point where disco came to its end, and there are 3 movies that came out that year that were disco related, and they all
really?
bombed.
What were the others?
The others were a film called The Apple, which was starring no one that you've heard of, and no one was in this movie. And unlike Can't Stop the Music, the songs are just awful, and it's obviously made by someone who hated disco. None of the music is even remotely catchy.
Did it make more money?
What's that?
Did it make more money than the other one?
No, it bombed. It bombed.
Okay.
The Apple is terrible. It takes place in 1993, I think, and the world is ruled by an evil disco producer.
Oh my God, that's awful.
The only hope we have are hippies. Those are the heroes of the film.
Oh, great.
They're the only ones who play good music, and and that film is just horrible, and it's ugly looking. There's another film, of course, Xanadu, which is probably maybe the best known of the 3, with which actually isn't so much disco, really.
That one I've heard of.
Yeah. It's got Olivia Newton-John, and the music's by Electric Light Orchestra, which is one of my favorite bands. Mm-hmm. And that's not so much disco, but it does have that feel, because the plot is essentially somebody trying to open up a dance place, a discotheque, I guess, even though the music isn't disco at all. But it still has that feel. And all the films have people dancing on roller skates. And all 3 of these films bombed. I mean, this was basically the turning point of culture where disco had kind of run its course and maybe got a little too popular. And, you can also make that there was a bit of prejudiced fuel mixed in here as far as, like, hating on disco and, that whole culture. So, unfortunately for these 3 films, they kind of, like, missed that opportunity. So they all 3 bombed terribly. But what lives on is, out of the 2 out of the 3 I just talked about are really memorable and fun movies, especially to look back on. Xanadu, actually the music in Xanadu is awesome. The plot of that film makes no sense whatsoever. But Can't Stop the Music does have, really cheesy disco. If you want to know what life was like in 79 and 80 in New York, it does, I admit, probably has a little bit of that feel. Maybe a little more cartoony, kind of Superman movie version of what New York was like. But it kind of does seem to have that feel. So, yeah, I just had to choose this because as soon as you said we're talking about 1980, this film popped in my head. It's like, wow.
Can't believe that's the first thing that came to your mind.
It was the first thing that came to my mind.
That's hilarious.
Said 1980.
I like that you don't always pick things you like.
Thank you. There is parts of this film that I do really.
It doesn't sound like you hate this movie, but I don't.
It's not a good movie.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. All the negotiating scenes are just painful, and the humor between Bruce Jenner and Valerie Perrine is just awful. And you could see that Bruce Jenner had he auditioned to play Superman.
I didn't know that.
He didn't get it, and you watch this film and you realize, wow, he was definitely destined to become the old woman in the Kardashian show. But yeah, it's just such an interesting time capsule, I think, this film.
Today I am going to choose something entirely different, naturally. I'm going to do a comic book series.
Cool.
A mini called The Untold Legend of the Batman.
I've heard of this one.
This was by Len Wein and Jim Aparo and John Byrne, and it's John Byrne's first work for DC.
Mm-hmm.
It's his first artwork, and I like this book a lot. It's got some really goofy stuff in it. Of course, this is not the Batman backstory that we know now, naturally, and it's kind of worth picking up and reading just to see how different Batman is now from what it was then. And it's interesting because it's not like Batman was trying to be like really serious, like really silly and undark, but there was a lot of very soap opera type stuff going on in his background, and I'll go through this and talk a little bit about what they did with it, because it's not okay. It's got like a really loose skeleton holding the whole thing together of a plot, but mostly it's just there as a crutch and an excuse to give all these different characters backstories, and it does it in that very late 70s style of let's not like actually have a framework for why these characters would be talking about their backstories. Let's just put them in a room thinking about it, you know? And I always thought that's one of the only things that drives me crazy about older comics. I do love older comics, but there was a lot of thought balloons going on back then.
Oh yeah.
And you'd have characters that for no good reason would just be standing in a room and thinking their own origin to themselves, you know? And I don't know about you, but I don't do that, you know? Like, I don't walk into a room and go, I remember. Well, I mean, you might remember things, of course, but you wouldn't necessarily stand in a room and just be like, and for anyone who happens to be reading this in a comic book, I'm going to explain to you exactly what happened and what went down.
I know. They used to write so differently. Well, of course they were trying to like inform the audience, but well,
of course, but there are less hackneyed ways to do that.
True. I mean, I remember reading comics like Spider-Man comics back in the day, where Spider-Man would walk up and see Harry Osborn and think, "Oh, it's my friend Harry Osborn. I hope he's okay and doesn't turn back into the Green Goblin." It's like,
and then it might even go farther than that and suddenly give a page-and-a-half flashback for the audience of how all that went down. You're like, okay, dude, you don't have time for all that in your head.
I mean,
obviously it's just there for the sake of the reader, yeah.
It's like if I ran into you and thought, "Oh, it's my friend Captain Logan. I wonder if we'll be doing that show today that we do on YouTube." I mean, I
and then
not
you
think that
explain
myself.
to yourself what Pop Culture Yearbook is. Yeah. So anyway, one thing you might find interesting, Manos, and if anybody's listening to this and knows of a place this happens before, let me know. But I'm pretty sure this is the first place it pops up. There is a old air quote Batman costume that pops up at the beginning of this that Bruce Wayne's dad wore. And that costume pops up in recent Morrison stuff. When in Batman Inc., and actually I think it was more in Batman and Robin, Grant Morrison had this costume with this giant bat head with these huge ears, and you could see more of the face that Bruce Wayne's dad was wearing in flashbacks. This is where that came from. And so it starts off, and at first you think you're reading the Twilight Zone, because in the third page, Batman opens this mysterious box he gets from someone. He and Alfred are in the Batcave, and he says, "It's a costume, Alfred. The costume worn by the first Batman, my father." And you go, "What?" Thomas Wayne was Batman before Batman, and then you find out, no, that's not what happened. They're just trying to get you to keep reading, because it's a great looking panel. What really happened was Thomas Wayne wore this costume to some party where the theme was to dress like some flying creature. And Bruce is there with him, and Bruce thinks the costume's awesome, so he says, when I grow up, I want to wear that. And so, that's where the initial idea of Batman is planted into his head. And then they still do the same thing that you always see, where when he finally decides to become Batman, it's because he sees a bat in his study, and of course, he has that famous line that's repeated in all kinds of other things, about how, criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot. That's all still there, but the actual costume comes before the bat in the study in this. It gets weirder. Bruce Wayne in this becomes Robin before he becomes Batman.
Oh, okay.
So, he decides, just like in regular, continuity now, that he's gonna fight crime when he grows up. But when he's a teenager, he puts together the Robin costume, and he stops some crooks to try to get the attention of this major famous detective, to try to get this detective to take him under his tutelage. And the detective names him Robin, and then teaches him everything he comes to know when he later becomes the world's greatest detective. And so he doesn't even become so he's actually Robin for a long time before he's Batman. And then when Dick Grayson comes into the scene, he gives him his old costume. Alfred doesn't pop up until way later in this. In a lot of continuities, of course, Alfred actually raises Bruce Wayne. But in this, Alfred doesn't come in until even Batman and Robin are both fully established. And he comes in, and it's weird, by the way, how he comes in, because he kind of forces himself on Bruce Wayne as his butler. He's like, I used to work for members of your family before, and by God, I'm going to be your butler. And he just kind of forces himself into the house. And Bruce Wayne doesn't want a butler because he doesn't want him to know that he's Batman. But he's like, no, I'm going to work for you. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how that worked, but okay. And so anyway. So the question, of course, is who brought Bruce Wayne up, and if Alfred didn't, and it was secretly Joe Chill's mother.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So Joe Chill kills his parents, and then somehow or rather he ends up in the care of Joe Chill's mother, and nobody knows that's who she is.
Wow.
And Bruce Wayne never knows. And I wonder if there's some other stuff in other comics before this, dealing with that, because it's not explained at all. It's like she just brought him up and he doesn't know, but Alfred knows for some reason. Because Alfred's thinking about it in the Batcave, and of course he's thinking it so that we know what happened, right? And so Alfred's like, well, unbeknownst to Bruce, Joe Chill's mother raised him, and he can never know. Here's a sandwich. And so it was so that was all really, really strange. And I guess it would be kind of interesting if I understood how it even is possible. But anyway, and so everybody's background is in this, like the Joker's background, and it's the classic Red Hood thing. Two-Face's background is in this, and a lot of them are pretty much how we remember them. Dick Grayson is pretty much exactly the same way, and then. I won't give this away in case you want to read it, but at the end when you find out, what the big mystery that's not even talked about all that much through the book, because it's mostly just giving people's backstories, there's a big plot twist at the end, and it's, it's maybe not what you would expect, or maybe it's exactly what you would expect. I don't know. It's not especially satisfying, but again, this reads more like really good-looking panels of encyclopedia, really, than an actual story. But it's kind of cool how in depth it goes. I mean, Lucius Fox's backstory is in this, and Leslie Tompkins is mentioned. She's not really talked about that much, and then the Batmobile mechanic is even given a backstory in this. So anyway, that's pretty much it. It's mostly worth it for the artwork. I love Jim Apato's Batman.
Me too.
I just got to say that that's probably one of, if not my favorite, designs for Batman.
I agree. It's one of the main Batmans I remember from childhood, and a lot of people slam him on the way he draws other characters, but as far as I'm concerned, his Batman is one of the versions of Batman I always think of when I see it. It's just so perfect looking for me.
To the point where I always find myself wishing that DC would allow themselves to go back sometimes to the gray and blue Batsuit. I don't know why you can't have that. I feel like you can tell the exact same stories and have that Batsuit.
I will say, what you're talking about with his father in the costume, I think that was actually a reference to, I can't remember. I think this is a 50s or 40s story.
Was it?
Yeah. I believe 50s, because it does seem like a 50s idea. And where it was a flashback of his father having an adventure or something in the costume at a party. So I think I think back then they were referencing something.
They were referencing that. Okay, cool,
yeah.
Awesome. I figured it was older than this.
Yeah, and that was interesting. This might be the first time the idea was brought out of Bruce Wayne being Robin first, because John Byrne did that again when he did the Superman Batman Generations miniseries.
Oh, okay, I haven't read that.
Well, you know what the premise of that is, right? Where it's Batman and Superman's history in real time from 38 to the present, and actually beyond to the future. Okay. And he kind of bookends it. Well, not bookends it, but he ends it with going back actually to the past, Bruce and Clark's teenage years. And Clark Kent is obviously Superboy, and Batman is Robin. And it was the idea that he had that, he would put on this costume. I always thought that was a weird idea because I always thought the Robin costume was supposed to be like influenced by his like circus act costume. Yeah. That's what I always took at. And so it was weird that he would be just coincidentally doing a costume like that. But although to be honest, maybe that would be a big kind of dead giveaway that his new teenage sidekick is dressed just like, this teenager that he just adopted that was a circus performer. Yeah. I was bugged by that in Batman Forever, when he has that Robin costume and then he says, put that next to the Batsuit. I'm like, you don't want to go out in that, dude. Like, people are gonna know. People are gonna know. But it is the same creator. John Byrne did that miniseries and he was so I imagine that's kind of, I think that's a John Byrne thing, frankly. Well, that's good to know. And so what do you think? I think this miniseries, this came out in the 80s, so this may be DC's first, I don't want to call it reboot, but revamp of history or something like that. Yeah. This is an early version of that. This is before Crisis, actually. Yeah, that's what I found interesting about it. But again, I haven't read a lot of old Batman, so I didn't know how much of this was already intact. But I figure you put Untold in the title and they're saying, we're going to tell you things that you don't know and maybe it's going to contradict because we've changed it. Well, I think what they did was they did what pretty much everyone else since then has done when they reboot the past, is they basically take what happened, at least the most memorable stuff, and do their own spin on it to do a more modern take. And I'm pretty sure that's what I haven't read this series. I'm familiar with it, but I've never read it. Mainly, I've never read it because I've heard about it after Crisis. I think I was in my late teens. You just didn't want to read it. I didn't want to read it because they already rebooted it. So who cares about this version? Well, that's basically my attitude. It's like, I don't care about that version of his past. This version of his past is the one they're going with. So I'm going to keep reading this, and I never even bothered with it. Well, like I said, little did I know they'd do that again and again. It's not, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's of course not the best thing ever, but it's definitely worth taking a look at just for the artwork. Because, it's Byrne and Aparo. I just don't think you get much better than that. I love Byrne and Aparo. Although I have to say I love Breyfogle as well. Yeah, I do too. And quick plug for Breyfogle because he's drawn Batman Beyond. Yay! Just want to throw that out there, so people should be reading that. By the way, I also wanted to mention real quick about that when those come out, they're going to be 48 pages. I think that starts next week. They're going to be 48 pages, and I thought they were going to charge a lot more, but that's only going to be a $3.99 book. Wow, really? That's just awesome. Yeah, I think so too. It's a lot of mini stories, so maybe that's why, but still, it's pretty awesome. That's a great deal. Anyway, that's all I've got, Manos. And that's all I've got. So what year are we going to travel back to next time? Next time, we are going to go back to the year 1968, I think it is.
68. Yeah, that was what we talked about.
Yeah, 1968.
Awesome. Cool. Have you picked your thing already?
No.
Like you usually do? Oh, no, not this time. Okay.
Oddly enough, I take longer with the years I pick.
Yeah, that is kind of weird, because it seems like every time I pick a year, you go, I got that, dude.
Yeah. I have to go back and look. There's a couple potential ideas, but I need to make sure they were in the year I'm hoping they are.
Well, Manos, let's take our time machine back to the present, back to 2012, and see how many more of these things we can knock out before the world ends.
Yeah!
And thanks, everybody, for watching the Pop Culture Yearbook. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm the real Manos.
See you next time.